Industrial Development Agency board meeting for July 7th, 2016. This time, is there anyone from the floor that would like to address the board? We all received our minutes from our last meeting. Is there any additions and or corrections? A motion to accept the minutes.
I'll second it.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Thank you. Page 20, we have our treasurer's report. Lyle?
Page 20 is the balance sheet in great detail for you, and I can read all the numbers. I point out that our unrestricted cash is down to $150,000, and we still have, of course, the capital reserve for the converges. That's $500,000. So our total cash is a little over $600,000. Total assets unrestricted, which is what we're interested in, is $210,000, with our other assets of $797,000, largely consisting of real estate and some flour mill equipment that will be leaving there soon. Going down to the bottom line, we're looking at a fund balance unrestricted, $757,000, with a total fund balance of $7,242,000. Two new items on the balance sheet this month. If you look in the asset sections under airport, we have two grants. We have an Empire State Development Grant of $50,000 and a $125,000 National Grid Grant, both restricted for the airport development. And you'll see that's offset down below by a airport grant deferred, total $175. Until such time as we spend the money, it will remain as a liability. David has assured me we're going to spend that money before the end of this fiscal year.
Is that the only money that is sort of, I hate to use the word budgeted, but budgeted to be spent at the airport, or is there, besides the grant, additional money that'll come out of the fund balance? I don't know who to ask the question to.
No, you're right. Unfortunately, there's probably, I'm certain there'll be additional money that's going to come out of the fund balance, come out of our unrestricted funds.
There's a series of activities being planned, and they all interact. We're after grants, we're after support from other entities and so on. The problem is all of that has not yet come together to know exactly what it is that we're going to need to accomplish. We are going to want to move that project along quickly because interest on the parts of two companies that I've mentioned to you before is heightened now, and so there's a real need to move this process along as quickly as we can. Our problem right now is we're limited to some extent by the amount of funds we have available to do this. We've spent a significant amount of money already, somewhere around $700,000, if not more.
We have a total of $638,000 in airport property right now.
We need to acquire more property, we need to do more infrastructure work, we need to do some more clearing and grubbing and so on. So unfortunately though, all of these moving parts have yet to be able to come together to know exactly what we need to do.
But it all has to come out of this 210,000 pot, less what you keep for reserve for the agency.
Or additional.
Or finding
whatever
money. I
monies
mean,
we
obviously,
might-
that's the easy solution,
Right.
new money somewhere.
Right.
Easy solution.
Well, it is the easy solution.
Yeah, we'll just take money from.
You just,
you
somebody
know, if you
else,
go- Would you bring your change?
Check the couch.
have a can drive.
Yeah, there you go. Bottles of
And you
cans.
mentioned budget, Rob, but remember, money spent on the airport are capitalized.
No, I do. You made that clear, and this is the balance, that's why I'm having the discussion here on the balance sheet side, because it's sort of the savings account is the buffer.
And you look at our cash balance right now, it's only $150,000.
Yeah, that concerns me deeply, so, just for the record.
Let's start finding some more money.
Yeah.
Any questions on the balance sheet?
No, sir.
Page 21 is our income statement. This is restricted and unrestricted. We're not collecting any fees, so we only had $18,000 in income this month. carried to $70,000 in expenses, so we had a $52,000 loss. Year-to-date, we're still positive, but I'm certain between now and then, we're probably going to suffer losses that will bring us down close to that budget of $157,000. There weren't any unusual expenses or certainly no income that I'm aware of this month. Going to page 22 is the unrestricted income. The only unrestricted income we have is the fee income for the administration of the loan programs and some minor stuff. Expenses, the large one, of course, being the administrative services expenses. So on the unrestricted side, year-to-date, we're losing $55,000. We'll probably exceed the budgeted $100,000 year-to-date projected loss, or for the year. We've already reviewed the balance sheet. This is simply the standard balance sheet that we present every month. Miscellaneous receivables, Convergy's, that's their monthly fee they usually pay in advance. Then we have the various details, the cash receipts, details of the microloans receivable and the RLF. And we have one in the city fund outstanding, the current loan. And you can see where we spent our cash on page 30. Very quickly. And no questions on that. We can look at page 31, our delinquent accounts. Riverview Plaza is a couple of months delinquent. Dank is lead on that, or North Country Alliance, and I believe they're working on it. Carthage Specialty Paper is still paying interest only. The total outstanding balance, principal past due is $19,000. Going down to the micro enterprise delinquent accounts, Bick Brothers is the Jake's Way Back hamburger place in the mall. North Country Alliance is lead on that one as well. A demand letter has been sent, but we're getting some movement from the Jake's Way Back corporate offices. I believe they've taken over the lease at the mall, and we're working with them and with Watertown Savings to collect about a total of $6,000 that they owe both agencies past due, so we're still working on that. Heroes Haven, I sent a demand letter. The total balance outstanding on this one, our portion of it, is $5,200, and I would request permission to write that off and turn this account over to collection. RoboSpray, it's about 6 months behind. His wife came in and made a payment in April, has assured us that we're going to get paid, so I don't really have any long-term problems with that. But I would like to get permission to write off $5,208.85 on Heroes Haven and turn the account over to a collector.
I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
I second it.
Any questions for Lyle on that?
What's the process and what does that cost us?
I think the fee that's charged right now is 30% of anything collected.
No upfront money.
No upfront money.
Yeah.
No, that's right.
So they'll keep roughly 1,900-ish, something like that. Somewhere in that.
Optimistically, yes.
If they collect.
If they collect everything. I mean, I'm doing fuzzy math here, but something like 1,800,
I
1,700.
think there's a possibility that we will get.
Right now, we've collected zero.
Absolutely.
So anything greater than
He hasn't
zero
made a
is.
payment since February.
On the motion, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried, thank you.
Ready for the budget?
You know, looking at our,
Oh, we're not?
both of our revolving loan fund and our micro fund, I think gives us a telling tale that we've got that much cash sitting there and we don't have anybody coming to, I think our economy's slower than a lot of people think. We're not getting any requests for,
We haven't had a loan, I
Well-
think, in nearly 2 years now.
right?
There are a ton of factors that are influencing that. One, we're seeing not as many projects in the pipeline, but also the fact that the interest rates on the conventional side are so low compared to where they were, let's say, 3 or 4 years ago. The advantage to coming to an agency like ours is minimal, in the sense that when you come to us for a loan, you've got to bare your soul in front of God, country, and everybody and his brother. And, you know, it used to be that a 5% number was real good and you were willing to do that. Well, if the disparity between our 5% and the bank's 5% or whatever it is minimal, they're not gonna come here. And because most of them have already established a banking relationship, because we typically, you know, come in a secondary role, fill in the gap, if you will. So there's those kinds of things, but I am concerned about the pipeline. It's a matter of the economy. We do have some that are pending out there. We'll have to see how they play out. We're just not sure. So.
Okay, on the budget, I entertain a motion to accept, or not the budget, excuse me, the treasurer's report.
That was easy.
Skip, was that quick to move there?
You got that done?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Treasurer's report has been accepted. Now we'll move right to the budget.
Okay, now we're doing, the budget starts on page 30. We're anticipating.
34.
Oh, 34, oh, trifles. On the revenue side, we're doing a lot of estimating on application fees. The RLF fees and micro fees, they're good. The Converge's city parking is passed through. We don't budget anything on land sales. We budget only a gain if we had any. Some interest income, a lot of it restricted, of course, in addition to the $200,000 pass-through for the Converge's capital reserve. So we're budgeting $886,000 in revenue. Now, we back into that. We start with our expenses. This is what we need. We have our known income, and then we plug a number in for pilot and leaseback fees, and that number is $475,000. Don't have any specific project in mind when we put that number in. It's what we need to balance the budget. So it's sort of a crapshoot here.
And that would be at the 2% rate, about $25 million in pilots, give or take. I mean, again, fuzzy math, but it's close.
So
Yeah,
it's,
we do our best to try to put some meat on those bones, but, you know, we.
ordinarily, we have some more specific projects in mind, and they're farther along.
Mhm.
We just don't have anything.
Yeah,
right
no,
now.
I mean, clearly.
The other thing that's happening too is these projects that we're working on are taking longer to bring to fruition. We're running into more and more influences from outside, whether it be environmental, financial, competitive, who knows? But it's just taking longer, it seems, to bring these projects to fruition. So
Okay.
that's a bit of a problem.
But I guess the question, I know at the finance committee, we approved the budget with a different number, and then it was corrected after because of the grant. The $125,000 grant had to be recorded this year, so it bumped it up to the 475. So the question I posed, or I pose, is we have 150,000 in savings, which is competing for spending money at the airport and hopefully covering, or, excuse me, unfortunately, we'll have to cover any deficit in this revenue. So if we only collect half of this revenue, we're in the hole by 75-ish thousand, 100,000. Any money spent at the airport is So where does that money come from? It's the question of the day. I mean, if it's not coming from revenue, there's no other like magical source of money
There
that
is
just,
none.
you don't have a printing press in the back.
We have a printing press.
You used
but
to be in
that's,
paper, so I wasn't sure if you kept some plates or.
Well, unlike, many people believe that our sources of income come from the taxpayer.
Yeah.
And, for the most part, that is not true. We generate economic activity based on our own activity, with the exception of the two small contributions we get from the county. Minimize them, they're important to us, they are, for ag and marketing. But we have to generate resources in order to spend resources to do economic activity. And I will tell you, the airport alone has been a significant drain on our resources.
But it's an important
It's
strategic
critical.
advantage to
It's
do
critical.
that.
We're at a point now where we're starting to have people look at us again, but we need shovel-ready sites for that to happen. Well, in order to create shovel-ready sites, we have to spend a lot of money. Is that we were kidding earlier, $18,000 for grass seed. I mean, when you start looking at the amounts of money that are necessary to bring these sites to a point where we can actually market them, it's a big deal. And we're gonna run, and this is, I've talked to the chairman a couple of times, we're running right now into a situation where I can see the agencies are gonna end up with some serious cash shortfalls if we don't do a better job of getting out there and creating activity.
I made the same comment in the finance committee meeting, and as much as it pains to suggest this, I really feel we should budget for a loss, because this kind of gives the fictitious feeling there's money to be gained here, and then you go spend money at the airport, and then all of a sudden at the end of the year, it's a negative. It just makes you more cautiously approach how you spend money out of the fund balance.
Sure does.
And I know it's a terrible thing to budget for a loss, but without specific projects, that's a big number. It's the only source of revenue. I just, my personal opinion, it's how I would treat budgeting myself. If you know you have a reasonable source of income, you don't just say, well, I'm gonna just put this in there because I know I'm gonna spend that much. Alternatively, I know the opportunity to come up with a contingency expense budget that's reduced is probably not there. These look like they're cut to the bone already. I mean,
They
you're
pretty
gonna
much
spend
are.
it.
They're
So,
pretty
I
much
mean, we
are.
know we're gonna spend roughly $825.
Rob, this has been a debate on these boards for as long as I've been here, as to how you actually try to budget, because there's really no way to know what's in the pipeline. I mean, I can go in there and I can give you probably names of at least 4 or 5 major projects we're working on, but there's no way in heaven's name I can guarantee. that
Timing
those
issue.
two-
You know, when does it happen?
When does it
Does it
happen,
happen?
or
You
if
know,
it happens even. We got one that would just solve our budget problems like that. Unfortunately, we don't know whether it's ever going to happen or not. And so, do you budget negative? Do you budget don't break even? Everyone knows that we're in the risk business, the investments we make are, they're not sterling investments, they're trying to create jobs. So, we're having
I
that
would
risk.
just say, I would have a terribly different feeling if you had more than 150,000 in unrestricted capital reserve. I mean, that's your
Yes,
savings
you're-
account, that's it. I mean,
Exactly.
and you know you're gonna spend more than $1 at the airport, right?
Yeah,
Don't
I'd say
disclose
so.
that you're gonna spend more than $1, that's
Yeah,
it.
absolutely.
I mean, it just comes to the point, that's it. Unless new money comes in, it just, my opinion is, I said the same thing at the finance committee meeting, it's just, I don't know, it just gives a false appearance that, oh, we're gonna make money. And then there's money over here, at the end of the year, they're not gonna reconcile. So somewhere around
No
June
doubt
of
about
next year, we're gonna be in hopefully good position,
hope.
but we could be in trouble.
It could go either way in a heartbeat, literally, depending on the size of the
Enough
project.
said, I'll stop speaking.
Well, it's a matter, I guess, of policy, how the board views these things. I think those veterans understand exactly what you just described. I mean, there's no surprises here, and we certainly have never hidden the fact that, our revenue's based on an imponderable. I mean, it's bad enough in any business where you're trying to sort through what your future's gonna be. But in this business, it's damn near impossible. As long as we don't get too many impediments thrown in the way of development, you know, and I cite one that we're gonna be facing here at 1 o'clock this afternoon. You know, maybe the future's bright, I hope so. I mean, that's really what we're betting on here, is that we can develop a strategy to provide a bright future for our community. That's the basis for all of our activity. And, boy, I don't know, Rob, I don't have a good handle on how to do it.
One thing we knew, we were gonna come into some challenges when the RCI money stopped.
Absolutely,
absolutely.
absolutely, John, sure. And that money's been used to fuel our ability to improve the airport park and help the airport, because, you know, every time the airport goes for additional funding, we support that by saying this is all part of an economic development activity as well, in addition to transportation. So, I mean, we've been mutually supportive, and we continue to be, and I hope we'll continue to be, so we can get this developed. And I know the county is taken on a lion's share with this airport, and they've done a great job in getting it up and running, and, you know, it's been a team effort. I just hope we continue to have the resources to do that. That's why I get gray hair, because you know, the future is not completely clear to me at this point, so.
So Rob, what kind of figure would you have in mind, or-
I don't,
or
I
what?
mean, the bad part is I have as much of a roulette wheel as what's here. I mean, that's the problem. It's, we had 350 on there originally, and then through just a timing issue, that 125 grant got added into there. I have no idea. I mean, 350 was the number that was approved at the finance committee, so that would a minimum be the starting point. That extra 125 just got shoved in there. And even, I mean, that's gonna put you at about a 90 loss or 75 loss or something like that, but it's probably, I mean, at least it gives us, I guess optimism is somewhat the right word if I look at it from the positive side. The optimism as a board that we have to be cautious on spending money because we may not make a positive revenue.
Yeah.
So let's be careful on the savings account side. And I mean, I know you balance with that every day, and I'm not saying any of this is malicious or, you know, we're being,
It's a fact of life.
it's just,
It's what we deal with, yeah, absolutely.
I would recommend go back to the 350 that was approved at the finance committee at minimum, and then if anybody has any strong objections one way or the other, this is my opinion. Terrible budget for a loss, but
You know, budgets are a
projections.
projection of a picture of what you're hoping or what you're looking for. I mean, you always hope that you do better than what you budget for anyways, so I have no problem going back to the 350.
It's clear,
Anyone else have
it's clear that these numbers are very much in our face. I mean, you know, we sit here on a daily basis at the desk and try to decide, what do we spend money on, and do we have the money, and, you know, how is that going to impact development? And it's a crapshoot in virtually every area. And sometimes I look at this and have wonder, you know, is that the right decision?
a, do you want to make a motion that we do that?
I'll make a motion to modify the pilot fee revenue from 475 to 350.
Okay.
Okay. Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I'd just say, it just goes from us knowing up here
Right.
that it's gonna be a loss to it being on paper that it's gonna be a loss. So-
Just record you've spent half your savings account. I mean, we're 75,000 loss, we got 150, so it's just sort of being careful about the pennies and dimes now.
I'm with you.
No, I agree.
And we're very good about that, but it does make it, it's a constant reminder.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So on the budget as just recently amended, any further discussion? I entertain a motion in a second to approve it.
I'll make a motion to accept the modified budget.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries, thank you. Thanks, Lyle.
Thank you.
Another great job, great hard job. Governance Committee. We adopted the updated policies and procedures last month prior to the Governance Committee meeting, and we have a resolution ahead of us now to ratify the adoption. So this is resolution number 0707-2016-01, a resolution ratifying the adoption of forms, policies, and procedures pursuant to chapter 563 of the laws of 2015. I entertain a motion in a second for further discussion.
Moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Comments? Roll call vote, please.
Dave,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Jeremiah,
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Resolution carries, thank you. Don't see any unfinished business as of right yet. New business. Don?
Sorry, I lost my place in the agenda, but none at the moment.
Okay. The presentation from Apex?
You do. You want me to do a quick introduction here?
Actually, my colleague just had to step out for 1 minute.
Oh, okay.
Do we dare ask why? No, I guess he's here. Okay. We,
Perfect time.
one of the projects that has surfaced for the community is a second shot at the Glue Island wind farm. Glue Island is a series of islands about 7 miles out in Lake Ontario. It's in the town of Hounsfield, but facing primarily the town of Henderson. The proposal is being shaped as we speak. Neil Habig and his company have approached us, and although at this point have not sent a formal application to the agency, have requested that we listen to a summary of what's going on with the project. And this is a summary that was presented to the County Board of Legislators last month, and I think you will find it of interest. This is a major activity, and will tell you that one of the interests that this agency has in seeing the possibility of this is that we believe one of the major methods by which we can expand our economy is using the natural God-given resources that we have in and around the community. And it's not just wind that we're talking about here, it's hydro, it's geothermal, it's photovoltaic, it's biomass, it's all those kinds of things. Because there is a dramatically increasing need for this type of energy. New York City just put an RFI on the street for, I don't know, 3 or 4 terawatts of energy, of alternative energies, which means they're gonna have to find sources for all this by the year 2050. And we believe that Jefferson County has the resources, whether it's hydro or biomass or a number of other of these things, to help provide that. And that means a huge influx in the economy. And to suggest that there is value to this exercise would be an understatement. So this fits in the rather strategic plan that we're trying to develop as an agency. So with that, although we haven't got a formal application yet, we thought we would turn it over to Neil Habig and his colleague, and Neil can tell us a little bit about what they're proposing to do out there on Glue Island, and we'll all learn something from it. So, Neil, if you would, my friend.
Sure, and I apologize, we're gonna put this on a memory stick and, because my computer doesn't have it. So
I thought I talked long enough to get you.
you're doing well there, then.
By the way, this is, if I may, Neil, I think this obviously is a controversial issue. The wind farm that we're talking about here in Glue Island has, the last time we went through this, some of you are new to the board, so you may not realize, we spent 1.5 years worth of investigation and activities and hired consultants and attorneys, and we developed plans, and it was a major undertaking. And by the way, much of what we learned and decided to implement were the project to move forward was now used around the state to provide background for many other projects in the state of New York. So we think we did a fair job of developing this. Our role as an IDA is not to be for wind or against wind. What we are talking about here is a project which will provide development to the community. It is our role to try to determine whether that development has more positives than negatives. And that's the role we play. We then will present what we discover to the taxing jurisdictions for their approval. So the approval process, yes, it has to go through us, and yes, we have to approve it, yes, we have to recommend it. But at the end of the day, because it varies from our uniform tax exemption policy, we have to go back to the taxing entities that are impacted. In the case of Blue Island, there are 3 entities that are impacted. And we're talking about taxing jurisdictional entities: the County of Jefferson, the Town of Hounsfield, and the Sackett Harbor School System. So those 3 entities would have to ultimately approve any pilot agreement that we were to propose. So, Neil, have I talked long enough for you to?
Perfect. Thank you, Don, thank you, and thank the board for the time to appear here. My name's Neil Habig, and I'm the project developer on this development effort, and I'm here with Dan Fitzgerald, who is the Northeast Development Director for Apex Clean Energy, based in Virginia. As an overview, what we want to talk about is to share some of the details of the project. Some of you may have been involved in the last go-round with a former developer. Project is different in some regards, so I'll touch on those. A little bit on the project status and schedule. A little discussion on benefits and so forth, and I know there are differing views on what the benefits and costs are of the project. Talk a little bit on pilot concepts, and then move into discussion and what the next steps may be, depending upon the board's position. The project, 32 turbines, taller than what was proposed last time, up to 600 feet at the blade tip. Energy generated from those 32 turbines estimated to support the electrical requirements for 35,000 homes. Now, we've mentioned this before, and wind developers often mention this, and it's sometimes misunderstood. The wind blows very hard sometimes, not all other times. So what this says is, what is the annual usage of a home, typical home, not everybody's home, and how many kilowatt hours is that over the year versus how many kilowatt hours are generated by this? And so it balances out to 35. People like to say it's not, doesn't, we're misleading, we're confusing, we're distorting. That's how that number is arrived at. Interconnected to the grid, obviously it's on an island, and so we have to bring it to shore. And the concept is to bring it down to Oswego, where there's near shore infrastructure. So you know, a couple of difference from the past effort. Previously, there were 84 turbines. Now it's down to 32. And that's a significant reduction, which has some impact on the aesthetic impact from the main. The other significant difference is previously, I mean, the previous developer had an underwater cable that at one point was going right to the town of Henderson and then going over land some 42 miles. Our approach is to go underwater all the way to Oswego, and in Oswego, the 115 kilovolt grid infrastructure is within 1,000 feet of the lake shore. And we'd be landing at a location that's adjacent to an existing generating plant, and so it will be in the context of that situation and essentially no overland, overhead transmission. That's just a cross-section of the undersea power cable. From a schedule standpoint, there's some uncertainties in the interconnection process, which is fairly involved, as well as the permitting process. Article 10 is a new approach that nobody has completely gone through it, so there's some uncertainty there. Also, in addition to Article 10, because this project includes a transmission line that's more than 10 miles long, it falls under Article 7, which is also under the Public Service Commission. It's a parallel but different process, and so there's some uncertainty with respect to schedule there. Some of the local benefits, construction jobs, 100 to 150. There's a profile of that over the construction season. It starts with a few. It probably goes above 150 at one point, and then as you wrap up into commissioning and so forth, it pares down and so forth. But that's a substantial number of construction jobs. Permanent positions, 3 to 5. It may be a little bit higher than that. We're working on some concepts as to how the project would be maintained, whether it would be people staying on the island or staffing from the mainland and going out to do their scheduled maintenance. So that the more recent talk is probably 6 instead of 5. These are wind technician jobs, people that climb the towers and work on the turbines day to day. Also, some more office related jobs to operate the equipment remotely. Property tax revenue and support to the town. County and schools, as Don mentioned, there's three tax jurisdictions in here. We're not here to dictate or say what we're willing to pay. It's a discussion, but based on comparable numbers, if you look across the state, there's some 25 operating wind projects. All of them, Madison just emerged from a tax agreement or a 487 exemption. That's the only one that's actually gone through that phase. But all 25 operating projects that have been built have been done so under a pilot agreement and utilizing what the range of pilot payments are. In those examples, it would exceed $20 million over the project life. You know, there's been a lot of discussion about tax cuts, tax abatements, and so forth, but there are you know, some other points and advantages to moving from basically a tax structure to a pilot structure. One of those is flexibility and revenue share between jurisdictions. I know in the last go round, the school district didn't want to own trucks and so forth, so they gave up some of what their revenue would have been on a pro rata basis according to the tax rate, and gave it to the town and made that adjustment. So the pilot allows you some latitude to distribute the revenue perhaps more appropriately than underlying rates would suggest. Stability over time, you can structure it a number of ways. Typically what's been done is a set fee per year, and often they have an escalation factor attached to them. And then it avoids assessment challenges between the property owner and tax jurisdictions, which become intensive. So some of the concerns we've heard about pilot is perception of little benefit. you know, it's a balancing question. It's what are the costs and what are the benefits? And it is $20 million. It is maybe 6 jobs. It is construction jobs. So it's a non-zero benefit. And then on the cost and impact side, there's been some basically some opinions shared as to what they may be. But I think it's premature at this stage, without having reviewed the details of the project, to what those impacts may actually be. So a couple of particular concerns that came up. Fort Drum, the DANK is doing a joint land use study, so that's been discussed a little bit. I'll touch on that, and then also a couple of comments on the aesthetic impact. So Fort Drum, obviously a key resource in the community, and you know, our project, I think, was the first to emerge in recent times. Subsequent to that, there's another project in the Clayton area, and then another one perhaps in South Jefferson. In parallel, there's a few in Lewis County. There's already one in Wolf Island, and that created some concern that this ring of turbines going to surround the base. And DANK has undertaken a joint land use study to look at that, look at what those impacts are. We went to the base and talked to them, and a couple things about Galoo versus some of the other projects. Galoo's 35 miles away. One of the key concerns they have is impact to the radar system. 35 miles away from Sac Wheeler Air Base radar tower. And there's more work to be done in the study, but the preliminary indication is, you know, we didn't get any indication from the DoD. Part of going through the permitting process requires you to go to the Defense Clearinghouse, DoD Clearinghouse, to say, here's what we propose. Here are turbine coordinates, heights, and so forth. Are there concerns? There's been some suggestion that the DoD's hands are tied a little bit because they want to support renewable energy in general. But I can tell you that they very much did send a letter to Copenhagen and said, hey, you guys are in our final alignment, not a good place to go. That's Lewis County. It's not the concern of Jefferson County. But they didn't have their hands tied. They were able to do that. They did that. Those turbines are 9 miles from the base, and they're in the final approach, and they showed us how the radar is more of a concern. Long story short, there's more work to be done, but given the distance, given the elevations, you can see here, these two graphs here, this shows that Maple Ridge turbines are several hundred feet above the base level. So if you look on the horizon, the turbines are going to be up in the air more. Whereas at Galoo, your airfield elevation is about 700 feet. Your elevation at Galoo is about 250 feet. So you're looking, you know, at or below the horizon. Yes.
Question, any of your discussions, I'm assuming is predominantly about aircraft landing and takeoffs. Anything about the missile defense system that's proposed? And I know it's speculative, but has that been broached with the base about any potential interferences with regards to their, I would say, higher tech radar than landing aircraft?
No.
Okay.
Any
potential to discuss with them?
Well, we're happy to discuss with
Okay.
them. We have sent them our turbine coordinates. I mean, we have to submit the turbine coordinates to the Defense Clearinghouse, which we did. They came back and they didn't have a concern. Now, that was some months ago. But in addition to that, we had a very nice discussion with Joe White over at the base, and we sent him our coordinates. Now, that's an evolving thing, so it may be that they'd look to put in other radar. But again, you can see wherever it is, the Galoo turbines, I don't want to say they're below the horizon, because based on their base elevation plus the blade tip, they might be right at the horizon, but it's quite a bit different. Copenhagen is a similar situation where the elevation of the turbines are higher than the elevations of the base itself. The base is nominally around 700 feet above sea level. Maple Ridge is 1,400 to 1,800 feet. Copenhagen is a little bit less than that. So again, is Galoo a problem? Well, it may be the least of the offenders if it's an issue. From a flight radar perspective, it does not appear to be an issue. it's also not, the actual turbines are not any flight airspace.
And you mentioned Wheeler Sac, how about, the Watertown International Airport, or whatever it's called? I guess I call it the International Airport.
No, you're right.
It is.
It is.
That's obviously in the PSS and it's covered. And
Yeah,
so there's some
we've met with Grant.
lesser concerns, but closer proximity, obviously.
Yeah, we met with Grant, it's not in airspace,
Yeah.
of concern. He brought out the maps and so forth, but I mean, separate from that consultation, we have to submit to the FAA because, well, there's the Watertown Airport, but there's flight paths and so forth, and so our preliminary feedback has been, they were cleared last time. They go through, if you're above 500 feet, and we submitted for a height above 500 feet, they give you a default determination of hazard, and then you should have to go through some additional steps, but it's not in any airspace.
Good.
Now, from an aesthetic standpoint, this is a view simulation showing from Westcott Beach what the turbines would look like 11.5 miles away. Now there's some mainland locations that are substantially closer than that, and some mainland locations that would be substantially further. But this is just a well-known site, and you can see, and people in the back room can't see, that there's some turbines there, and it's not, from my perspective, not dominant on the landscape, but it's subjective. What's the quality of the projector or the screen? What is your distance and so forth? And so we have these view simulations done. We put them on posters, and often they evoke some skepticism. Like, well, that's not real. That's not done. In fact, it's done according to computer models and contrast levels and so forth. So it should be accurate, and it's accepted in professional circles as representative. But there is some skepticism. So one thought is that we have turbines on Wolf Island. You could go some location where you can see the turbines at Wolf Island from some known distance and get a first-hand impression of what it is. Now, this project in its previous incarnation came to the idea, and there was a vote, and the county voted, and so forth. And at the time, we had a discussion with Representative Blankenbush, and he said, this was before my legislature as a decision, and I felt that the right thing to do was to get a sense of what it was. And so he went out with, I think the legislator at the time from the Henderson Hounsfield district, and said, take me to an area where I'll be able to see the island. And now, at that time, there's no turbines on the island, so all he could see is how far the island appeared, and had to imagine what the turbines might look like. Here, with the Wolf Island turbines, you can go to this location on Shore Road on Point Peninsula. That would be 11.5 miles. See for yourself what it would look like. In fairness, the Wolf Island turbines are of different height, but it gives you a pretty good indication of what that sort of impact, and the spacing of the turbines and so forth is a little bit different, but it gives you a sense of what a turbine looks like some 11.5 miles away. So that's a suggestion. There's been a lot of speculation of what it will and won't do, but there are locations. That's one we found 11.5 miles. There are probably some that are more representative. The closest mainland location to Galoo Island is going to be about 6.5 miles to turbines. I've been looking for a place that you might be able to see. There's a lot, along the lake shore. There are a lot of homes, and there are also a lot of trees. So it's not obvious from aerial photos where you might be able to see it. But I imagine somewhere you could get 7, 8, 5 miles away to get a good impression of what the turbine might look like at that distance.
And if I could, Neil, just in addition to that, we'll be doing several visual assessments from different viewpoints. We'll be collecting that data and input from stakeholders over the next couple of months to make sure that we're ready to prepare those and present those in the application that will be reviewed for the project.
So that's an overview of the project, of what it is, what we understand some of the concerns. We're going through the Article 10 process, which is heavily focused on public involvement and public input. We published a public scoping statement, a preliminary scoping statement. Early June, we received comments. Not a lot of comments. We received comments from the Department of Public Service, of course, DEC. Sackett's Harbor submitted comments. Who else? house on the island, and I think that might be it. So Henderson chose not to submit comments, county didn't submit comments and so forth. But we're going through those comments and soliciting feedback. But the thought was is appropriate time frame. I mean, coincidentally, this resolution that the county just passed on Tuesday came out. We didn't know that at the time when we talked about coming in to talk. We'd like to get the board's feedback on the impact of that and what that means to the IDA and their involvement in this project. But one of the comments we'd seen in the media is that, you know, the developers come in and they dictate. It's a bilateral agreement. You know, we can't force the agencies or the tax jurisdictions to do anything, nor can they really force us to enter into specific terms on a pilot. It needs to be a bilateral agreement. So we're just here to discuss, to answer questions, and evaluate what some options for the project are. Question of cost and benefit. We've just recently seen the resolution that was passed and associated policy statement. And you know, one of our reactions to that is that it's a bit of a rush to judgment. You have different projects, different costs, different impacts. And some of the rhetoric associated with, you know, the benefits are, it's construction jobs, but it's really no jobs. Well, it's 5 or 6 jobs, it's not 0, and it's a lot of revenue. To the school district, it's a very important project. It's substantial revenue to them in their overall budget. And so they seem to have some support for it. We haven't had detailed discussions with them, but they seem to, and the town seems to be supportive. But you know, I think there are some unanswered questions with respect to what the impacts are, as well as what the benefits are. I mean, that's part of the negotiation, is the benefits are defined by what finally the terms are. The impacts, one of the main ones, because it is so remote, you don't have some of the impacts that have garnered concern in other projects, such as flicker or sound, or things like this. You're 6 miles away from the mainland. From an aesthetic standpoint, Henderson undertook they called it a property value study. It's really a report. It's not a study. It didn't study anything. It borrowed findings from an unpublished report. And that unpublished report has a lot of questions and uncertainties, and in fact, followed some approaches that aren't consistent with statistical practices. It's got a lot of flaws. Anyway, so you know, we'd open it up to questions and thoughts and concerns. One of our questions to the board is this resolution that just was approved on Tuesday suggests that they want a tax level commensurate with what taxes would be, or pilot payment commensurate with that. They don't say anything in the resolution with respect to sales tax, but in the associated policy statement, they say we don't see the need for sales tax. Now, my understanding is that if the IDA has the latitude to grant sales tax exemption, and I don't know that they can sort of partially grant it or not. One thing that they can do is half of sales tax goes to the state. So nominally, let's say it's 8%, 4% of that goes to the state, doesn't stay locally. 4% of it stays locally. That 4% going to the state, probably in excess of $2.5 million. The project is subject to certain sales tax exemptions just by default, a production tax exemption and a capital improvement tax exemption, sales tax exemption. So by precluding sales tax, you're taking $2.5 million maybe that could remain locally or to the benefit of the project, and allow the project to support greater benefits to the community, and you're sending it to the state. So one of the questions we have is, what is the IDA's stance on sales tax programs? But you know, we'd like to explore that. What does the resolution mean to the IDA, and what is their position? Because the other option of available to the project for a pilot would be a 47 option. It wouldn't involve an IDA. It is limited to a 15-year term. It doesn't come with a sales tax exemption. It doesn't come with mortgage tax and so forth. And so the IDA option has some advantages and attractive to the project in some regards. On the other hand, if the IDA says no sales tax, 15 years, and no mortgage tax reporting exemption, then it's pretty simple that the 487 option doesn't come with an associated IDA fee, and it would be disadvantageous to pursue an IDA pilot.
Neil, part of the role we play at the IDA, for the board's benefit, and I know they know this, but we negotiate what we consider to be the best deal for the community. That's really the essence of our function. Last time, dealing with the developer for the Blue Island Wind Farm, we spent many hours in deep negotiation, and I think at the end of the day, we showed increasing benefit for the community as a result of those negotiations. We do this and have done this on every project that I am aware of since I came here. Not just wind, it's a function of what we do. In this case, if you choose to do a 487, or if the board decides this is not a valuable project, the ability to negotiate with you is no longer an option for us. I can't sit down and say, Neil, you're gonna have to pony up some more here, you're gonna have to put a fire truck here, you're gonna have to do whatever. I can't do that because I'm out of the picture. So that is one thing. Secondly, I think it's disingenuous for anyone to say that there is no benefit of a project of this size for our community. If you add another enormous infusion to our tax base, you're going to see some very positive result. It's what it is. If as a development agency, we forget that our mission is to develop the tax base and improve the tax base, then we've not done our job. And so when we value this project, and nobody's put anybody's stamp of approval on anything, by the way, and we can't and wouldn't until such time as we get an official application for this.
That's what I was gonna come up with. Is really, we need to see an official application, because at that point in time, then we can start doing our due diligence and actually see and start to digest the numbers and where, how that works. And then the board takes that and weighs that against all the other things that come along with it. But really, until we get a formal application and start to get those numbers and have staff start to work with those numbers, I don't, and I'll just speak for myself and historically from this board that, we have never turned anything away without first seeing what we're looking at.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And then, we take and make the decision from there. I can tell you the last time it was a 2-year process that we went through. It was tough. But, and I'll open that up to any of the board members here that might want to,
I agree. If you can't talk facts, the rest is postulation.
Right. If I could, following up on the concept of a unique project, I think one of the things, we came primarily to give a status update on the project because there's been a lot of talk about it and wanted to update folks on it and also make sure that you're included in the stakeholder process. This new Article 10 permitting process has been difficult to learn for all of us, and I think many projects have gone to following the regulations so closely, and we've realized, okay, we got to do that to formally get the permit, but we want to make sure that we're in touch with everybody locally the way that we would have been in the previous process. So that was one of the main reasons we were here. But going back to talking about specific projects, when that county resolution came out, it had us questioning, would this be treated as a unique project? I was the one who had to go to Apex Clean Energy to fight to acquire this project, and I had to explain this. So I was the one who initiated our work here in the Northeast, which they've been building projects projects in Oklahoma, which, wow, it's really easy, okay, relative to what we have to do here in New York. So I sold them on the idea, we can build in New York, we can do projects in New York. And then I showed up with an island, and they said, what are you thinking? This is crazy. But we went through our diligence, and we saw this has the potential to be a great project. And when we talk about it being a unique project, I've had to fight that unique project thing for the last, well, year really, since we started looking at it. And in that, I also see this as a very unique project because Glue Island itself sits out there. It's not using any services and won't be using any services from the county. Right now, it has X amount in property tax revenue, and I don't see a lot more happening with it than that right now. I think we bring a project that can actually turn that into an economic generator that's not drawing from the municipalities for services at the same time. So suddenly, it just bumps up what can come out of that island. And it's not in the traditional sense of you're necessarily gonna see crops harvested on the island or something necessarily manufactured on the island. It's a bit of a unique way, but it is a way to turn that one little piece of the county into an economic generator. So when we saw that kind of resolution, like I said, I got a little bit nervous that we were being put in a box with everything else. You know, as Neil pointed out, especially in relation to Fort Drum, we are remote from it relative to those other projects where I think, you know, they do have some concerns. But again, I just want to make sure that each project's being treated unique and just wanted to get the feedback from you on how best to approach this.
I think it is worthwhile to point out that this board is very sensitive to the fact that these projects can be very divisive in a community. And it's a great concern to us. I mean, this is our community, we live here, these folks represent others who live here, that's our role, we understand. I think the question though is, it's a question of value versus problem. In my personal view, there are places that wind farms have been talked about that they don't belong there. The Cape Vincent mess, which is what fueled some of the really serious problems with wind, never should have been proposed. This is my personal opinion. I happen to believe the Clayton thing is a bad idea. I don't like those things sitting in the middle of a residential community, particularly one that has such a wonderful resource like the St. Lawrence River. On the other hand, there is no project we deal with that doesn't have some negative impacts. Putting a wind project out on Glue Island, there probably is some negative impacts, but I think the overall value to putting it out there warrants us to consider this in a very strong way. And that's all I would say. We're going to, as a board, we'll consider this from our vantage point to see if it has the value we think it does. If it doesn't do that, then it probably will never advance beyond this board. But just to let you know, we're not necessarily pro-wind, but we are very pro-economic development. And this, in my view personally at the moment, based on what little I know, has great value to consider.
And I would encourage everybody, you know, we've talked with elected officials, but, you know, everybody who's on any board or any group in the community has contacts and you're hearing concerns. We're at the point in the permitting where we're really shaping everything that we're going to study and be obligated to. So if you have any input, any comments, we've got an office at Sackets Harbor now. Please stop in, share it, send us email, get in touch with us. What we're looking to do is in the next month and a half, make sure that we know what all that is, so that we're confident what we put together in the application answers everybody's questions and concerns. Whether you're for or against it, let's get it in there so that we get to that application so we can all review it. And that review period is going to be probably a year-long review period.
Is it snowing in Sackets Harbor?
I was just gonna, that was, you stole my thunder. I was gonna say, you have to put a summertime picture up there.
That's lake effect.
Something with leaves, right?
One of the concerns, you know, just speaking of, you know, off the cuff here and as a private individual, so to speak, that seems to be expressed, that I've heard repeatedly, is that if you allow a Glue Island wind project, does that open the door and make it more likely that there would be other wind projects in and around Jefferson County just because this one, you know, happened to be successful? and there's a concern that it's the camel's nose under the tent issue type of thing. How would you respond to that?
Well, I don't think there's anything from an infrastructure standpoint. I mean, our cable goes down to Oswego, so it's not like we're facilitating a superhighway that's going to attract wind farms. So from that regard, I don't think it will. From a reception perspective, if you know, it's built and everybody jumps on board and says this is wonderful, and it's built and it's well received after it's built, then that presumably could have some impact on encouraging people to do it. But I mean, ultimately, it becomes the decision of boards like this or tax jurisdictions as to whether they want to encourage or discourage the development. But there's nothing inherent about the project. I mean, it is unique in regard that it is far away. It's far away from the base. It's far away from the mainland and so forth. So it's fairly unique in that regard.
And I think we've seen that with, dare I say, Cape Vincent, you know, that didn't get a permit. It was not seen to be a project that was going to be viable. You know, at some point, people realized that was inappropriate in the way that it would, in either size or location or whatever, but it added up to that not working. And we've seen that throughout New York State, but we've seen some great successes as well. And there are counties where they've had, you know, great success with locating a project in one area, but really do not want it in another area. I primarily have done most of my development work in Clinton and Franklin counties originally when I was with another company. And, you know, there was the, here is good, but if you block our view of Canada, that's not gonna happen. And if you get this close to the Adirondack Park, it's not gonna happen. So I think every county has to look, it's just like any other kind of zoning. It's like, hey, there are places that are good and bad for everything, and we just have to weigh each one and see how it works out.
What's the size of the project in terms of megawatts and production?
110.4 now? Yeah.
110.4 megawatts?
Yes.
That's the infrastructure or the production?
That's the nameplate capacity, so that's installed.
Okay, and what would the production be off of that?
So production, I don't have the numbers off.
Somewhere around 400,000 megawatt hours a year.
400,000 megawatt hours per year, okay.
We're finalizing our wind studies, which really dictate what that final number will be, and that's part of actually what we have to do in our application now is basically prove this thing's gonna be productive enough for anybody to bother doing it.
Right, and that's gonna be tied directly to the grid, and you're gonna be selling that to the grid?
So it'll be tied to the grid, and we can either do a power purchase agreement with someone or sell it at market rate.
Thank you.
Which if we have an opportunity to negotiate with you guys, we'd love to talk about it.
I think it would be interesting to see a pilot program was launched downstate last year, community choice aggregation. I think it's something you should look at.
Yeah.
We would very much. Can you,
Yeah.
I don't mean.
No, I was just gonna.
Go ahead, John.
That's where I was going. I mean, the the indirect benefits are the sales tax and taxes, et cetera, et cetera. Direct benefits to the entire county would be some type of remote net metering with with the CCA or CDG or whatever, that the county can see direct impacts, I think would be, you know, something that you guys would probably like to see, right, Don? You know, the off-takers being the communities or the county itself doing some type of net metering if that's possible.
And a big piece of input we could use from that is figuring out what the county would be expecting as far as use. So if you guys can start working on that, we can start to see how that would all work out. And this is really great because, you know, 5 years ago, the utilities stood between
Right.
us and everyone else, and we couldn't do
We
that
can.
direct
Right.
contract, so.
Right, so if the county could see, and I'm making up numbers, but if the county could see a 20% decrease in all of their energy bills across the entire county, that's something that hits everybody's pocket and everybody could really look at, as opposed to just sales tax revenue for Saga's Harbor.
Or even with PPAs, the advantage is, if you do it for 10 years, you know what your bill is for 10 years. So whatever
Right.
that number is, you know what it's going to be.
Now, would they be able to do that if the transmission line is going to Oswego, or would there have to be a transmission line coming somewhere in the county here?
I'm not familiar enough with community choice aggregation, but I
Yeah.
believe it could be done, it'd be more of a paper transaction than anything else.
Is that the same NISO zone?
No, Oswego Zone C
And this is not,
Jefferson
right?
Zone E. But,
That's what I thought.
you know, on the commercial industrial level, you can have customers that are remote from your zone of
Oh, you with a wheeling charge from one to another then?
It's not quite wheeling, but it's a basis difference. In other words,
Yeah.
if the price in D and in C is $32 per megawatt hour, and
Yeah.
in E it's 35, that has to be covered by someone, and it can be managed.
Right. So is there an opportunity to have a line coming into, and I don't know any
No,
politics
it
or
wouldn't have to be
anything.
a line, it would be, so we'd have to go directly to the grid with the whole project, that rule
But
says-
does it have to be out of their zone? Can it be in their zone somewhere, you know, I don't know where Blue
No, I don't
Island
believe so,
is.
because Westchester, I know they were going more for not necessarily price stability, but the renewable angle, and they
Right.
wouldn't have had the renewables in that area to get it. So they're probably pulling from other zones as well.
Okay,
So we probably have to work together on both sides to figure out exactly how this worked.
right, but that's just a comment, you know,
Yeah.
that's just a
No,
comment.
it's definitely one of the things I'd like to see us pursue.
This feeds directly into what we are trying to envision for the community, how we benefit from our own natural resources. And if we had those kinds of advantages in this county, the business attraction effort would be substantially enhanced. Because now you're talking about substantial demonstrated visual savings impacts on a taxpayer. And that translates well when we're out there, you know, knocking on doors. How do we compare with X, Y, and Z? And we're always in a competitive situation. Could you guys take 2 seconds and talk about Article 10? Because
Before we get, I believe the county just signed an agreement,
Tri-county,
Tri-County municipalities.
I don't know what it is, but it sounded
Power
interesting.
purchase of solar.
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Anchored by both
solar array, yeah, that's the BOCES initiative. This would be another method by which we could help the taxpayers. But if that answers your question, could you just quickly talk about Article 10? One of the criticisms we're hearing about this is that we're losing local control, that you know, somehow that this process is taking the final determinations out of local control and placing it in Albany. Can you talk a little bit? I know it's a new process, we're all getting into it for the first time, but what's your take on all this?
Well, Helmsfield's supportive, so if it wasn't Article 10 and you had local rule, or home rule, you know, the people who have expressed concerns about the project wouldn't have had any different voice than they do now. In fact, they may have more voice in Article 10. The way it's structured, you have 2 ad hoc members on the siting board committee. That's just particular to this situation. It's designed to, it is burdensome to the applicant as far as the scope and depth of work they need to do before they even submit an application. They have to prepare a public involvement plan, and they have to go out and consult with all the stakeholders and so forth. So now that's just, that's to make people aware of it, and then it gives people the opportunity to comment on the preliminary scoping statement. And then it's reviewed by this siting board, which is 2 local, someone from the PSC, from the DEC. And some of these agencies would have voice in even the process before with the DEIS and the secret process and the local site plan approval. So I don't know if you can take the thoughts.
So yeah, so they tried to make it robust, so this process is new and it's been like cutting our way through a jungle, you know, as we go through, and we'll ask Public Service Commission, hey, okay, so we get to this point, what do we do? Oh, we don't know. So we're discovering it. Luckily, we're like 3rd or 4th in line, so we can watch everybody else learn. We have another project that unfortunately is ahead and been leading the way in learning. But as I said before, so what we realized with this project was, okay, so we have to do what Article 10 says, which has a robust public involvement period from the day we launch our public involvement plan until operations if we can get a permit. I mean, their intention is that the public will always be involved, so they had great intentions on that. What we're seeing in reality is, I saw in some of the early work we did, there seemed to be a little bit of separation. So that's why we've been trying to stay in close touch with the town, the village, the county, and yourselves, as well as all other stakeholders. You know, a lot of projects before, I wouldn't have standardly said that we need a local office, but because we now need to talk to everybody almost individually, that became something that was beneficial to do. And it really helps us shape the project. So while statutorily, we might not need to do all of that. That helps us to answer the question. So an Article 10 application needs to be deemed complete before they'll even review it. And deemed complete means that we have to have taken into consideration all of the issues that were brought up in the public involvement program, in the preliminary scoping statement that was just done, in the comments on that, and then we'll have this phase called stipulations, which we refine all the comments that were made. So we end up with a final outline for what we will study in this project that then we have to commit to filling all those blanks in the application. So, you know, I'd say keep an eye on it. I mean, we're still learning our way through the process. I think the first application may have gone in last week, so we finally see what a full Article 10 application is. We thank our competitors for being first so that we can take a look. But, you know, so we're learning as well. So one of the things we want to do is make sure that we keep open the channels of communication outside that standard Article 10 process so that we're still addressing the community needs. But we really want to parallel this as close to the seeker process as we can, because I've found in all my permitting experience, that has been the best way. I mean, it's the community that hosts this that, you know, really should be shaping it, and that's what we want to do, is stay in touch with them and build it accordingly.
There's a larger concept at stake here too. For years, we had in New York, Article 10. So we act as though it's new legislation, and it is to some extent because it's been revitalized and changed. But for years, we had an Article 10 which cited generation activities, whether it was coal-fired plants or nuke plants or whatever. The issue is the governor has a REV program now. They're revitalizing energy in New York, and it was deemed that new generation of the types we're talking about, alternative energies, which were not very popular when coal was being used as our primary fuel for generating, had to reestablish a process by which we could cite additional generation around the state because it's going to be needed. So Article 10 is kind of a result of the strategy for changing how we generate our electricity. And so part of the question we have is, how valuable is this process? Does it allow for the input from local communities and so on? I think it's a reasonable question, and I don't know that we know the answers yet, although it certainly appears as though they've taken every opportunity to give us a chance as a local community to provide input, whether it's wind or biomass or whatever other generation we take on.
Right, and that's, you know, so we do have a link to the docket. There's a docket site with the Public Service Commission where people have been able to post comments from the day we filed our public involvement plan, and that will stay open until, I think, even through operations, but we'll see if we ever get there. God, that's far away, I hope to see it. You know, and so there will be public involvement the whole way. That's the official public involvement, but I want to make sure we're doing that as well as the in-person public involvement. Also, the comments, we received about 197 comments on the preliminary scoping statement. Some of those came from the public as well. So, you know, and this is open for everybody to participate in all the way through the application process. We do have on our website an explanation of the Article 10 process, how to obtain intervenor funding, and we do have a pre-application hearing coming up in July 24th. Okay. In July, we'll put it on our events page, actually.
It'll be the Hounsfield Town Hall.
And at that point, the administrative law judge from the Public Service Commission will lay out what's going to happen next. We'll talk about discussing dispersal of intervenor funding, which we expect. So let me tell you a little bit about intervenor funding. We're required to pay into a fund that can be used by the local, by any stakeholder to examine what we're doing, whether it be hire experts or hire attorneys or do their own studies. And so we pay that at preliminary scoping, and then at application we pay a higher amount per megawatt. And that money is usually it's directed towards the host municipality. So we expect the town of Hounsfield will receive a lot, just like under the seeker process where we would have agreed to, you know, fund the engineer or the lawyer or whatever. This is how it's done now. But it allows for other stakeholders. So if there were a certain group that applied, you know, for one reason or another, let's say there was a birding group that said, hey, we want to study something about the birds in particular. If they were a party and they put in for the intervenor funding, they could get that money. Right now, given the number of parties, I would say Hounsfield's probably gonna, be receiving most of that money, but there are other parties who may send in applications as well.
Can those dollars be used for a CCA study as well?
They could potentially, so everything goes to the administrative law judge, and my God, I don't know what they're gonna say, to be quite honest, but, it could be used for a study like that, so.
Okay, thank you.
That's a possibility.
I have a question. Is there been any changes in the technology as far as the lights go, as far as the red lighting? I mean, I have a piece of property and I face Wolf Island, and it's about 6 miles away as the crow flies. And if there, I'm one of the people that think that the turbines look cool. And again, I'm speaking as a private person. I like the way they look during the day, but it's one of these things where it looks worse at night because you can see the red lights and you hear about things like, transponders, so they turn the lights on when there's a plane going by or something like that. But has that ever come to fruition? Is there?
Right, so that technology is just coming into approval with the FAA. The first few sites are going online. Aside from the technology being approved by the FAA, I very much want to make sure it works. I believe in our pilot safety quite a bit.
Is that something that could be retrofitted to the project? If for instance, this did go through and, I just.
Potentially, yeah.
Potentially.
And you'll be glad to know, actually, the Public Service Commission raised that in their comments on the preliminary scoping statement. What are the options for this? So, while we may all feel certain ways about Albany, somebody there's thinking, they got one. And by the way, I currently live in the city of Albany, so don't think Albany when you think me, though, because living in the city next to the government is even a little bit worse than being the colony. Let me tell you that all that state land.
You're just a serf then, right? There you go.
Those big state campuses, all that impact.
We're gonna fight
on
too
the
many
city.
years.
You mentioned a transponder, and I think a lot of people don't realize that, a lot of airports, the runway lights are controlled by the pilot in the airplane who's coming into land. He just clicks on the right frequency and the runway lights come on. And then they stay on for a certain period of time and they automatically go off.
Yeah.
Now, that technology, can that be transferred to this, and is it practical, and is it, something that could be done? I imagine it could be done, but whether they will allow it is another.
It's actually, it's pretty expensive technology. It's a radar activated technology. So it all depends on the site, how many radar units you would have to do, but basically what it does, it detects when a plane is coming near. The radar says, okay, there's a plane coming near, activate the lights, and then it tracks that through, and when it finds it passes out, it will turn them off. My first question was, so what if it doesn't work? Default is the lights will go on if there's ever a problem with the system. So it's one of those technologies, great idea, let's make sure it's working correctly, because we don't want to get that one wrong.
One more comment on that. I think this speaks to some of the uncertainties of impact. It is, in our discussions with stakeholders, been raised several times that it is a concern. Sometimes when it's foggy, the lights look, there's a big red halo and it's worse. But some people have said, look, I don't have any issue other than the night lights, if you can do something about that.
That's exactly how I feel. Like, I honestly, the staring at Wolf Island during the day, it doesn't bother me a bit. And but the only people, and I know a lot of the people that are on the shoreline, I believe, I'm not speaking for them, I'm speaking only for myself, but I just think that it's one of these situations where, when they stand at the end of their dock, at night or in the evening, they're having a fire on the shoreline, for instance, seeing the red lights, people want to think that there's nothing there. They forget that Canada, they want to think that the other side of the lake, it's just wilderness and bears and wild animals, and deer.
Are you talking
moose.
about the Canadians?
But, so I'm just saying that I think that a lot of the shoreline opposition might find that like a valuable piece of
Right.
of the project.
Which is, what we said about the county resolution is it presupposes what the impacts are. Well, here's a question where significant impact, you might be able to mitigate it. And so you make a decision before you get that question answered. But I think that we had said about there was a spot that was 11.5 miles away, the wind turbines, now we know there's one that's 6 miles away.
You're welcome to come see. I get last night. I can see 7 lights, 7 red lights.
Just
That's
watch
not
out
the
for the
world,
bears.
You know.
Thanks a lot.
Can I just,
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
We
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Yeah, go to another meeting.
This one went longer than, we got a little business to attend to too, before we lose our quorum.
Yeah, we need to,
This one still has a quorum. 'cause you
Okay, we have
four,
a-
but
Yeah,
the
we're-
next one, are we okay in the next one?
airport application grant? Grant application?
2 seconds, I just want to let the board know that we are joining the county and others in an application for funding for the airport/airport business park. And Dave Zenbeck and Marshall and Jay and others, Peggy and everybody here in the office have been working damn near around the clock to get this application in on time. It is a biggie. If we were lucky enough to get it, it would be an enormous positive impact on the community. So Grant Susi and the architects and the engineering firms and everybody have been working on it, and just want you to know we have our fingers crossed. If it works, you're going to be hearing cheering all over the county, I think, for this one. So
There's that printing press we were talking about.
there you go.
I
Exactly.
knew you were holding back.
I was biting my tongue when you were talking about it.
Counselor, we have a subordination agreement?
Yeah, we've got a general security interest in all of the collateral for Highlight as part of our loan with them. They've apparently recently financed the acquisition of some used equipment, looks like vehicles and that sort of thing. And the finance company is requesting that we subordinate our security interest to their security interest in the newly purchased used equipment is what it is, I believe. Right, Lyle? Yeah. And I talked to Lyle about it. He thinks we're well enough secured with the rest of their assets that this shouldn't pose a problem.
It was what, about 275-ish? I was trying to get that off of one of the reports. It looked like there's 275 on that loan. It was on one of these other reports.
Yeah, it's actually 2 loans.
Is it 2 separate ones?
Yeah, it's, one.
Found it somewhere. Never find it
Revolving
again.
loan, okay. 429,000 on the IDA.
The other one was 274 because I found that on.
Okay, yeah.
That's the only one I found. I guess I didn't look at both.
That's the IDA and the LTC.
So about 700,000-ish, give or take.
Yeah.
Yeah, the equipment that they're asking to subordinate to is like 2011 to 2013. There's 3 sweepers. I'm not sure what the rest of the stuff is.
Yeah, I know what it's.
Yeah,
So it'll be just on that equipment?
just on that equipment, yep.
I don't see an issue with it.
Yeah, it doesn't affect the original.
No, everything
deal.
else,
It's just
everything
this
else
new
we've
stuff.
still got for
Yeah,
security.
kind of looking at this stuff, it probably isn't worth 50 grand combined. Yeah, unless Don needs
Yeah.
do you need a sweeper for the IDA to do the Convergence parking lot? You know, you might want to have interest in it.
Let me rethink this.
Actually,
Can I
3
have a
sweepers.
motion and a second
I'll make the motion.
to subordinate
I'll second it.
for this equipment? And that'll be listed as such, correct?
It's on schedule.
Yeah,
A.
it's on the Schedule A to
Yeah,
the,
I see that.
to the letter.
Any other questions?
Yes, sir.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution carries.
The other matter has to do with Roth. You've approved the lease back and the pilot with Roth at your last meeting, and have induced the project, but they're not quite ready to finalize their financing. I'm not sure exactly where they're at with their discussions on that. So we're not really ready to close on the lease back and the pilot, but they are in a position to start construction. So they've requested that they be granted the sales tax relief before we close. And that's what the proposal is, it's before you today. And since you've already induced the project, there's no
Okay.
problem with that.
That's what I wanted to make
Right.
sure, that as long as
Yeah.
that doesn't affect the
Right.
remainder of the pilot.
Right, and we don't have a policy about this, and we don't have it listed in our application. Some IDAs actually have this part of their application, that if a project needs to start construction before closing, that they can get the sales tax relief.
Maybe that's something we should look at in our application then.
And the proposal here is that they pay 25% of the agency fee and council fees in order for us to give them the exemption, so.
By the way, one note parenthetically, this Roth business has caused the staff to begin to investigate the possibility of what we thought were new approaches to financing, and these are tax exempt bank loans. Well, after thorough investigation and, you know, a lot of discussion with attorneys and trying to get Roth organized and so on, turns out it's not such a new deal, and in fact, is probably not much different than things we've done in the past.
Yeah, and given the interest rates today, this level of project doesn't really warrant bond
The bonds.
financing, so.
Yep. So,
So I will be in touch with their counsel within the next week to try to see where they're at with their closing.
On the memorandum of agreement, which allows for moving ahead with the ST-60 sales tax exemption on this before closure.
I'll make a motion to accept the modified MOA on the induced project.
Second,
Second.
all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, thank you. Anything else?
That's all I have.
None? Motion to adjourn.
So
Second.